Welcome back to part 2 of the stress management workshop. In the last video, we defined stress and ways that you can set the foundation for a stress-less lifestyle. Once again, this is Sam DeZerga, Academic Success Coach in the Learning Commons. Let's go ahead and get started with part 2 by taking a look at approaches for managing stress. There are 3 main ways to approach a stressful situation. It's important to remember that you always have a choice. You can choose to alter the situation or your approach to it, avoid the situation, or accept the situation. This is known as the AAA approach. Let's explore each of these approaches one at a time. First, let's talk about altering the situation. In other words, changing your approach to handling the stressful situation. When dealing with stress, there are often many ways in which you can change your approach or the situation to make it less stressful. Let's think about altering the situation as reframing the way that you think about the situation in your mind. There are so many situations that immediately cause us to stress out. It's those immediate responses that you should be looking to alter. There are 3 ways that you can alter the situation. First, thinking positively and having a positive attitude. For an example, let's say you always find going to the dentist stressful. You decide to think positively about it. In your mind, you think, well, if I get this over with now, I'll be done with it for an entire year. Next, improving specific skills that will help you manage the situation. So, for example, if you find interacting with a particular coworker or classmate stressful because they tend to get very aggressive, so say they have a very aggressive communication style, you could decide to take some communication and assertiveness training. Last, think about doing something differently. Let's say traffic has become very heavy on your morning commute to school. After looking at your navigation, you decide to take an alternate route. That's doing something differently. However, there are a few instances where altering the situation is not appropriate, including situations where altering the situation is not safe. So, for example, you find wearing your seatbelt claustrophobic and so you don't wear it, or when altering the situation means transferring your stress over to someone else. There are also some appropriate and inappropriate actions to consider when altering a situation. Make sure that you're going to benefit in the long term by altering the situation. For example, let's talk about doing something differently. If we're changing the route that we take to get to school, we want to make sure that that route is going to take about the same amount of time. It's not going to add 40 minutes out of your way and actually cause you more stress in the long term. So you have to weigh the positives and the negatives of altering the situation to determine whether or not it's worth it. All right, so we've talked about altering the situation. Now let's explore another way to take power over stressful situations, and that's by avoiding them entirely. Avoiding the situation is all about identifying the stressors or things that you needlessly stress about, and then finding ways to remove them either partially or completely from your life. But you should understand that this is not always possible, so this might not be the approach that you choose 100% of the time, because there are some stressful situations that are inevitable. Avoiding the situation is appropriate if repercussions are non-existent or extremely minor, or if other people are not negatively affected. But you should not use this approach if avoiding will cause more stress in the long term, if it's going to transfer stress to somebody else, or if it negatively impacts your health or your safety. One of the most powerful tools for avoiding a stressful situation is the power to say no. This tool enables you to say no in a way that maintains control over the situation and does so in a constructive and assertive way. A positive no comes in several forms. For example, say no and then follow with an honest explanation, such as, I am uncomfortable doing that because, or this stresses me out because. Or you could say no and then briefly clarify your reasoning without making excuses. This is going to help the listener better understand your position. This is where you really want to use some of your assertive communication skills in order to maintain control over the situation. All right, we've talked about altering and we've talked about avoiding the situation. Let's move on to our final A, which is accept the situation. Accepting the situation will help us cope with those things that cannot be changed. There are some stressful situations in life that just need to be done, even though they're unpleasant. Accepting the situation as it is and being as positive as possible about it is what the third A is all about. You can even use some of the principles from the first A to alter your attitude and make the situation a little less stressful. Some examples include going to the doctor or taking turns presenting for a team project instead of passing it off to someone else. Accepting the situation is appropriate when the task has to be done eventually, there's no way of avoiding it, or if avoiding or altering it is going to cause you more stress or another person more stress. Accepting the situation is not going to be appropriate when you're doing something just to please someone else, if avoiding or altering it would actually reduce your stress more than accepting it, or if you accepting it means that you had no choice, so you're only accepting it because you had no choice. Some people feel that accepting stressful situations and living through them makes them powerless, but this is not necessarily true. With this model, you're choosing to accept the situation rather than alter or avoid it. By having these three approaches, you have the choice and you have the power. And often having that power of choice can reduce your stress greatly. Another tactic that can help you accept a situation is positive thinking, as we discussed in our first A. Identify the benefits of accepting the situation. Earlier, we used the example of taking turns presenting for a team project instead of passing it off to someone else. So if you went ahead and you presented for this team project, you can gain many things from that. So you could gain the respect of your professors and your classmates. You could increase your own self-respect, and you would also have more confidence in yourself, knowing that you faced this stressful situation and that there was a positive outcome. All right, so now that we've gone through the AAA approach, let's go ahead and move on to part three. So, up next, we're going to be talking about a few stress reducing techniques. Click on the link in the description below to check out part three.